What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to kick off Superlatives Week. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down my top 5 breakout candidates for 2022 fantasy football. All week, we're going to be breaking down breakout candidates, sleepers, busts, 5 at a time. Me and Danny are going to go through our top 5s each, culminating on Sunday when I go through my annual September 4th sleepers video on my birthday. So that's the plan for the rest of the week. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys like my breakout candidates, leave a like. If you don't like my breakout candidates, leave a like. Leave a comment down below. Who is your biggest breakout candidate this year? And subscribe to the channel if you are new. But without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so you guys should know the drill if you're not new around here. But if you are new around here, what we're doing is we're going from 5 to 1 and a peek behind the curtain. Like I said, me and Danny drafted our breakout candidates, drafted our sleepers, drafted our busts amongst each other. So if you don't hear Elijah Moore's name here, it means Danny took him from me at 101. So my top 5 breakout candidates in descending order. We're going to start with number 5, a guy that is a very hot topic name right now, who was actually in my sleepers video, but he has risen so much in ADP that he is no longer a sleeper, and that's Dameon Pierce, running back for the Houston Texans. The ADP on this guy kind of varies a little bit because depending on the site, it might not be updated. On multi-site ADP right now, he's going off the board 97th overall, RB 35 off the board, but on Underdog, where it's sharp and up to date, he's a top 75 pick at RB 24. I have him ranked right now as my 79th overall player at RB 25. So a guy that's about a 7th, 8th round pick in ADP right now. If you guys were following the draft and dynasty season, then you'll know that we were high on this guy way back in March and April. I had him ranked as RB5 in the draft class, ahead of Brian Robinson, ahead of James Cook, ahead of Rashod White, ahead of Zamir White, a lot of guys that went ahead of him in the NFL draft. My comparison for him was Chris Carson. I think he showcased that play style so far in the preseason. It was pretty simple to me. When I actually watched this guy play, he can fucking run, man. Like, he is a good running back. I wasn't expecting it based on his numbers. He looked like a middling prospect, but once I actually watched him play, I was enthralled with this guy way back in April. The hot topic for Dameon Pierce was, well, if he's so good, why isn't he producing in college? And I honestly can't tell you. I don't know why Kyle Trask was the starter of that team. I don't know why Kyle Pitts wasn't getting 30% of the team's targets. I don't know why Kadarius Toney wasn't productive until his senior season. It's clear to me that Florida's just a stupid franchise and a stupid team, and they didn't know how to use Dameon Pierce correctly. Now we fast forward to the NFL, and the kid has already won the starting job before week 1 of the NFL season. He won it probably in preseason week 1. That caused him to get the night off in preseason week 2, despite being a 4th-round rookie running back. The most important thing that a running back can do, and I talk about this all the time during the draft, is force missed tackles and break tackles. And he led the class with 37% of the time tackles avoided per attempt. Graham Barfield ranked him as the 4th highest scorer in the class in yards created, behind Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, and James Cook. And the Texans cut Marlon Mack. They actually brought him back to the practice squad today, but it looks like it is wheels up for Pierce RB1 season in Houston. The real question now comes down to, where do you draft the guy? Because for me, I'm not willing to spend, some super high pick on him, because I've seen him go really high in some people's drafts. Some people are like, oh, should I draft him in round 4? Should I draft him in round 5? No, what you should do is draft him at the end of the wide receiver tier of Elijah Moore and Devontae Smith and Darnell Mooney and Adam Thielen and Brandon Ayuk. Once those guys are off the board and once those elite quarterbacks are off the board, then I'm okay drafting Dameon Pierce in the round 7 to 8 area. He's going to carry solid volume. He's going to probably get some receiving work as well, but it's still the Houston Texans offense. It's a meh offense at best. Realistically, this guy's ceiling is probably what Elijah Mitchell did last year, right? It's probably, middling RB2, high-end RB2 type of numbers. So if your league mates are wise to what's happening in the preseason and they want to spend a round 4 pick on Dameon Pierce, go ahead, let them. But if they have no idea what the fuck is going on in the fantasy football calendar right now, and they're going to let him slide because he's buried in ADP, and that's how they draft, is based on the ADP of the site that they're using, you can get a good value on this guy in round 7, round 8, round 9. A couple people have sent me their teams so far saying that they got him in round 8 and round 9. That is definitely where I'm comfortable drafting Pierce, and I think he has a lot of upside from that spot. Now let's get into my number 4 breakout candidate, which is another rookie in Drake London. Drake London, ADP of 101 overall as the wide receiver 42. I have him ranked as my 71st overall player or my wide receiver 35. And if you're just coming back to fantasy, you don't know who Drake London is because he's a rookie. He was the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft, to the Atlanta Falcons in rookie drafts back in, May and April. If you weren't around here, he was my wide receiver 1 in the class by a country mile. He checked every box that you want a rookie wide receiver to check. His freshman and sophomore year, he produced modest numbers, but the thing that's really impressive about Drake London his freshman and sophomore year is that he was sharing the field with some great wide receivers. He was sharing the field with Michael Pittman Jr. and Amon-Ra St. Brown as a freshman. In his second year, he was sharing the field with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And also, football wasn't even his full-time sport. He was playing on the basketball team his freshman year, and then he decided to focus on football his sophomore and junior season. And in his junior season, he went absolutely hog wild. Before injuring his ankle towards the end of the college football season last year, he played 8 games and saw 119 targets, which is 15 targets per game. The USC passing offense only threw the ball 333 times. So he was getting over 35% of his team's targets. He had over 40% of his team's receiving yards, and he had over 40% of the team's touchdowns as well. The best landing spot that Drake London could have landed was to a team that had a lot of targets up for grabs, and that is exactly what we had in Atlanta, because outside of Kyle Pitts, who's obviously a great player, they have Calvin Ridley suspended. Julio Jones has been gone for 2 years. Russell Gage moved on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bryan Edwards and Olamide Zaccheaus are their number 2 and number 3 wide receivers right now. And we don't ever want to draft somebody based on the fact that, well, who else are they going to throw to? But when that aligns with someone who commanded targets at such a high level in college, then it's very okay. And then it can equal elite fantasy production. Drake London has alpha size, 6'4", 215 pounds. He graded out really well for Matt Harmon's reception perception, 73rd percentile against man, 93rd percentile against zone, which was top 5 in the class, and 68th percentile against press coverage. Is Drake London one of the best separators in the NFL draft this past year? Probably not, but is his separation good enough to be a strong NFL wide receiver when you combine it with the fact that he's great in contested situations? He uses his body well. Absolutely. That is what Matt Harmon wrote about him in the reception perception profile, because a lot of the discussion and the jargon around Drake London during the draft process was, well, this guy can't separate, but that is absolutely not the case. He's very good, especially against zone coverage. He's strong, he's nimble, he's tough to cover, and he's great after the catch as well. I really don't care who's throwing him the ball in Atlanta, because clearly Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder, whoever ends up being the quarterback there, is not going to be a world beater, but all they have to do is be good enough to target Kyle Pitts and Drake London over 110, 115, 120 times per season. So Drake London, a guy that I absolutely love this year, especially if you're in a shallow league. If you guys play in a league where it's 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex, by the time you even get to the point in the draft where Drake London goes, you're drafting for upside anyway. So draft Drake London in round 6, round 7. And if you need to, grab yourself a Tyler Lockett or something in round 8 or 9 to cover your own ass while he develops early on in the season, because I think once we get to the mid to late portion of the season, Drake London could be absolutely dominating fantasy football, even if he gets out to a bit of a slow start. So number 3 on this list, breakout candidate, is a second-year wide receiver by the name of Rashod Bateman for the Baltimore Ravens. He is going off the board as the 76th overall player, wide receiver 33 in drafts right now. I have him ranked at 54th overall, wide receiver 27. And when we're talking about prospect profiles, because it's still definitely relevant for a second-year wide receiver, Rashod Bateman's was quite good also. Early declare, first-round wide receiver, productive for multiple years at a young age at Minnesota. Goes to Baltimore last year and unfortunately suffers a sports hernia injury, which is what Kenneth Walker is dealing with in Seattle right now. In training camp, caused him to miss most of camp, all the preseason, and a couple games during the regular season, which is very, very crucial development time for a rookie wide receiver. So that definitely set him back a little bit. But the impressive thing is what Rashod Bateman did under the circumstances of his rookie year, missing all that time last year. 5 straight games once he came back in week 4 of 6 or more targets, and 7 to 12 total games that he played last year with 6 or more targets. He was not running a full complement of routes whatsoever. He was competing for targets with Hollywood Brown. He was competing for targets with Mark Andrews until week 15 or so, once he actually started running a full route tree. This was a part-time player still producing at a pretty high level as a rookie. Hollywood Brown is now gone. He is the clear number 1 wide receiver on this team. Mark Andrews, the number 1 target, and it's just Andrews and Bateman there. Lamar is going to have to throw the ball to these 2 guys and pretty much these 2 guys alone. And the important thing from like a schematic standpoint that I want to highlight about Rashod Bateman, and it's confirmed in his reception perception profile from last year as well, is that his strengths align with Lamar's strengths, and his weaknesses are not necessarily Lamar's forte anyway. He was very good on slant routes, on curls, on comebacks, on outs, on digs, stuff that's over the middle of the field, easier throws for Lamar Jackson. And Rashod Bateman can be the possession receiver that Lamar Jackson has never had. He's separated at a high level, like I said, despite missing that crucial development time. 74th percentile against man, 85th against zone, 81st against press as a rookie wide receiver who missed all that crucial development time early on in the offseason. He fits the quarterback's strengths like a glove. We know that second-year wide receivers in the mid-rounds have historically been good upside swings to take. They return on ADP more than any other archetype of wide receiver in this range, and they smash their ADP more than any other archetype of wide receiver in this range as well. As you guys can see, 41% of the time they're returning on ADP, 25.8% of the time they're smashing ADP, which is a lot better than other receivers in this area of the draft. So Rashod Bateman, a very, very calculated upside swing, especially if you guys play, like I said, in a league where it's very shallow and you can afford to take an upside swing in round 5, round 6 at wide receiver because you already have 2 or 3 wide receivers on your team. Rashod Bateman is a great one to take. And number 2 on this list of breakout candidates is a tight end in Dallas Goedert. And Dallas Goedert is one of my favorite draft targets in all of fantasy this year. 69th overall where he's going right now, tight end 8. I have him at tight end 7, 66th overall. So the market is relatively on par with where I have him at, but I just absolutely love this guy from a structural standpoint. I think we have a perfect storm in 2022 for Dallas Goedert. He has the potential to have a top 3 to top 5 tight end season and be this year's Mark Andrews. He's been a top 12 tight end each of the last 3 seasons, despite not being the tight end 1 on his own team for the entirety of the season. Last year, Zach Ertz got traded midseason. We saw what Dallas Goedert was able to do down the stretch. We're talking about the number 21 ranked tight end in route participation last year, splitting the field with Zach Ertz for part of the year and playing in an offense that threw the ball 494 times, which ranked dead last in the NFL. The reason that he was still able to finish as the tight end 8 in points per game is because Dallas Goedert is extremely talented, and he was also one of the most efficient tight ends in the league for the past couple of years, but especially last year. He ranked number 1 in the NFL in yards per route run, which is a very sticky metric for wide receivers and tight ends. Number 1 in yards per target, number 2 in yards per reception. This dude's a beast, and he's going to have the opportunity to produce in this offense. Now we have no Zach Ertz, so he's going to be on the field more often, running more routes at the tight end position. We have an offense that I expect to be a lot more pass heavy, especially more pass heavy than the 494 dead last ranked pass attempt offense that they were last year. And the presence of guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith will ensure that Dallas Goedert can remain efficient. He's not going to be the focuses of defenses or anything, but mainly it'll also give him touchdown opportunities because I think this offense is going to be quite good. I think they're going to move the ball very, very well. And Dallas Goedert has not been a high touchdown scoring guy. He only had 4 last year, but I seriously think 8 to 10 is in the range of outcomes for him. He's a big target. He's going to be in a better offense this year. And I think, as we've kind of talked about with A.J. Brown, this Eagles offense is going to be more so middle of the pack in terms of pass attempts rather than the dead last offense that they've been. The reason I haven't been drafting a ton of the early round tight ends is because I see this year's Mark Andrews and Dallas Goedert going in round 7, and I don't really feel the need to reach in round 4 or round 5 for a Kyle Pitts, for a George Kittle, for a Darren Waller, because honestly, I think the ceiling is pretty much equal for Dallas Goedert as it is for those other guys. Yeah, he's got to compete for targets with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but he's been efficient on low targets before, and I expect him to increase his targets, increase his efficiency in a better offense this year. I absolutely love everything about Dallas Goedert in 2022. And finally, the number 1 breakout candidate this year that I have on my list is Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver from the Detroit Lions, going off the board as the 63rd overall player, wide receiver 27 in ADP. I have him currently ranked as my 53rd overall player, wide receiver 26 in ADP. The case for Amon-Ra St. Brown, in my opinion, is very, very simple. People are overestimating it. They're overrating how difficult or how much better he needs to be than he was last year to be great for fantasy this year. We have a second-year wide receiver, which I said with Rashod Bateman, hit and boom at higher rates than most archetypes of wide receivers in the mid-rounds, who's literally already been great for fantasy. We don't have to project anything for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's already been a very productive wide receiver. He's just 23 years old, taking a next step in his second-year career. As a rookie wide receiver last year, he posted 16.92 PPR points per game, post week 4 once he finally cracked 60% of his team snaps. We're talking about a guy on a per game basis from week 4 on that was better than Stephon Diggs. He was better than Mike Evans. He was better than Keenan Allen and T. Higgins on a points per game basis, which is what we're scoring in fantasy football. And of course, the big catalyst for this was the way he closed out the season. 6 straight games of 10 plus targets. And yes, I'm sure everybody's, well aware that it happened when DeAndre Swift was out for a couple of those games. TJ Hawkinson was out for a couple of those games. But in my opinion, this guy's a legit star. He's shown up and looked the part in preseason games so far as well. The Lions only played Amon-Ra St. Brown in their first game of the preseason. And in that game, he played 10 out of 10 snaps with Jared Goff and the other starters. And this is extremely important because Amon-Ra St. Brown was typically a slot-only wide receiver last year. He was playing in 2 wide receiver sets, so that's something that he checks off. Once he started playing in those 2 wide receiver sets last year, he went berserk, as we know. And as I alluded to, the elephant in the room that somebody's probably going to comment is, that Swift and Hawkinson were out for those games. Yes, I'm well aware that Swift and Hawkinson were out for some of those games, but we're talking about, number one, a running back. He shouldn't have too many effect on Amon-Ra St. Brown's target share. And number 2, we're talking about a tight end who's barely cracked the top 8 in points per game the past couple years, despite having like 100 targets on the season. So those guys don't really scare me. This isn't like Brandon Ayuk, where we have Deebo Samuel and George Kittle coming back, who are hyper talented players. TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift do not scare me nearly as much for Amon-Ra St. Brown's outlook. And Jamison Williams, the wide receiver that they drafted in the first round, is not expected to be back on the field at least for like 6 to 8 games at the beginning of the season, coming off of an ACL tear in January during the college football playoffs last year. Amon-Ra is the number 1 in this offense. Jared Goff loves his slot wide receiver. We've seen it with Cooper Kupp in the past. This offense runs that New Orleans Saints type of scheme where it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Get the first downs, generate offense that way. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is the chain mover of this offense. I already drafted him in round 6 of the Big Dogs Bash. I intend to target him in my home league draft on September the 3rd as well. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown this year has legitimate 100 catch, 1,300 yard, 6 to 8 touchdown type of upside. And those are back end wide receiver 1 numbers. I think he can get there. And I think he is a monster value right now in round 6. You can get this guy. I typically build out, as you guys know, I'll build out a hero RB or a double hero RB, and I can get Amon-Ra St. Brown as my 4th or 5th wide receiver in that type of format. And in any kind of PPR, he is going to be phenomenal this year. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment any of your thoughts down below. Who is your biggest breakout candidate in 2022? Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here as well. And a reminder, check out the pinned comment because time is running out to get your shot of $10 million in total prizes on UnderdogFantasy.com. Best Ball Mania 3 is wrapping up, over 80% filled right now, and you can win $2 million if you take this thing down. You can win $1 million if you come in second. You can win another $1 million if you are the highest scoring team in the regular season. Take your fantasy knowledge to action by using promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit on Underdog Fantasy and get your shot of $10 million in total prizes. For using our promo code, you'll get 100% match back up to $100. So if you put in $100, you'll have 200 on site or 8 bullets in the chamber to try and take down that $2 million to first place. And as a thank you for using promo code FSE, you'll get our redraft rankings for free. You'll get our dynasty rankings for free, including our draft ready cheat sheet that you can print off or you can use digitally right in your fantasy draft this year if you guys haven't had it yet. A lot of value packed into using a promo code, and you don't have to use $100 when you deposit. The minimum is $10. So even if you just want to draft a couple fast draft teams, some Pomeranians or whatever, you can do that as well using promo code FSE. So if that interests you, check out the pinned comment, check out the link in the description. Also check out the Patreon if you guys want bonus content, patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.